On April 11th of last year, I flew overseas to take a vacation for a little under 3 months. I had just graduated and got my bachelor's degree in media and communications a few months prior, and I was currently stressing out about all the worst adulting things. Job hunting, day-to-day life issues, the existential dread of wondering where my life is going and if I'm going to find a stable way of going through it all by the time I'm old enough to move out and get married, and oh my god, what am I doing with my life? Needless to say, I needed a break from all of that. Luckily, through almost all of 2022, I had been saving up and preparing myself to take a trip overseas by myself for the very first time. You see, in April of that year, I was told by my good friends Rosen and Casey, the latter of which you'll know as the voice of Kanna on our channel, that Zen and I were invited to their wedding, which they'd be holding on June 11, 2023, a whole 14 months later in Anaheim, California. Naturally, I was surprised and incredibly flattered that they thought of me when making their invite list, although it did give me a moment to think. I had never been overseas on my own before. All my experiences out of the country have been with my parents and brother, mostly traveling to Macedonia. Yeah, even in spite of my surname, a lot of people tend to be surprised by this when I tell them, but I was actually born in Macedonia, even though I did end up moving to Australia before I was even a year old. Speaking of which, I also had my cousin's wedding coming up, which was being held in Macedonia the following year, and at the time had an undecided date. So for a little while there, it seemed as if I'd have to tell my friends that I wouldn't be able to come. But the thing is, I didn't want to let this opportunity pass me by. I've been wanting to visit friends overseas for almost a decade, and I've been saying time and time again, oh, I'm sure I'll get the chance to do so when I'm older. And well, I am older now. Plus, 14 months was a ton of time to save up and at least make an attempt to go to Anaheim, so it was worth a shot. And on top of that, I could also try to squeeze in a trip to Minnesota as well, so that I could stay with Zen for a little bit. Sure, she'd be at the wedding, but there were also people to meet and places to see in Minnesota as well. So I got the money, told my cousin ahead of time what I was doing, and tried to coordinate things to the best of my ability so that I could make it to the US on time. And as you can tell by the fact that I'm making this video, I failed. Wait, I succeeded. From April to early June, I got to go back to Macedonia, attend my cousin's wedding, and have a great time with my family. But as soon as June hit, I was all but ready to depart from my family and see my online friends for the very first time in person. And as time passed, I realized more and more that I just couldn't let this trip go unrecounted. It was way too important for me not to share it with you all and have it detailed out to make sure I never forget just how magical it was for me. Literally, since we did go to Disneyland. So, seeing as it's been a year and I'm in the storytelling mood, here is all that happened when I spent 3 weeks in the United States for the first time. It was a surreal experience leading up to the day that I'd finally be going over to the States. Macedonia was a fun time and we got to see many places, even more than we usually do. Though, because I had already visited Macedonia half a year earlier in 2022, it definitely grew to be a part of my normal life again, helped by the fact that I had obviously been there before in years gone by. That's not to undermine my experience in my country of birth, but at the back of my mind, there was an anticipation for what was to come. Traveling all by myself to a country I had never gone to before. As much as I tried not to, I couldn't help but start counting down the days in those final 3 or 4 weeks before my flight. We spent the last 3 days before I left at the capital of Macedonia, Skopje, which I had never actually been to in a meaningful capacity, if you could actually believe it. It's where the airport was located, so we figured it would be better to check out the city for a few days beforehand, so we didn't have to drive 3 hours on the day I left. It was great to finally check out such a big part of the country that, up until that point, I hadn't gotten to experience. It was also a good way to get my emotions out when saying goodbye to my relatives a few days prior to leaving. When the day came for me to take my first flight, I couldn't stop feeling butterflies in my stomach. I woke up way earlier than I even intended, practically forced my parents and brother out of bed, and had us at the airport well in advance. I got my boarding pass and sat down for a moment to take everything in. In just a few moments, I'd be going up an escalator and saying goodbye to my family. Ultimately, it wasn't the biggest deal in the world since I knew I'd be seeing them again in only 3 weeks, not to mention the numerous calls I was sure to have with my mother during the trip, but in that moment, it honestly felt like the first time in my life I was actually stepping out on my own. I hugged my parents and brother and proceeded to head towards the gate. Security was honestly not that big of a hassle since due to both this trip and the last, I'd become used to all the procedures you need to go through. The only thing that caught me a little off guard was the extra steps needed to enter the US while at Istanbul, which was the only layoff during this first part of the trip. But all in all, it was pretty simple stuff. What wasn't simple was how my first flight went. Oh my god, talk about a bad first time to fly alone. So after I made it through security, I picked up some Burger King and patiently waited for my flight. When it came time for us to board, I got up and waited in line as they got things ready for us to enter the plane. But that's just it. 10 minutes passed and the line had not budged an inch. It took them another 5 minutes after that to actually get everyone on board and get us flying. Now, okay, that doesn't sound that bad at first glance. There's just a minor delay, those happen all the time, so I had nothing to worry about, right? But the delay in isolation was not the thing that was on my mind. See, when arriving at Istanbul airport, I originally had a 2-hour layoff to get to my next flight, which in of itself is not too bad. But now, due to this delay, that time was cut down to about an hour and 50 minutes, which, okay, that's not too terrible. Except then, the flight decided to throw another wrench into the mix. We were experiencing air traffic, which meant that we couldn't proceed until the sky was all clear for us to do so. As such, our plane made 2 entire loops back around before we were finally able to get back on track, setting us back by about 15 minutes. Couple this with the 10 minutes it took to get off the plane, and I was now looking at about an hour and 25-minute layover when arriving in Istanbul. To say I booked it across the entire airport would be an understatement. I already knew where to go since I had gone through Istanbul airport 3 times in the last 9 months, so I practically sprinted across the place just to make sure I'd have enough time to breathe once I made it through the gate. Luckily, everything went fine and I was able to make it through the gate 5 to 10 minutes prior to boarding time, but that kind of stress is exactly the kind of thing I was dreading when flying alone, so to have it happen at the start of the trip was not helping in the slightest. Thankfully, nothing else bad would happen for the remainder of the trip in the States as far as flights are concerned, which includes the flight to Los Angeles itself. That said, the flight lasted around 13 hours, which was the longest I had ever flown before. It was a bit of a pain, not helped by me being situated in a middle seat, which is objectively the worst seating position. But I was able to get some good conversation in with the guy sitting to my right, who was really stoked for me being able to visit the States for the first time. He definitely managed to shave off most of my worries I had flying into the country. Otherwise, I just plunged myself into some movies, like Into the Spider-Verse for instance, which I had hoped to rewatch since I had planned for Zen and I to watch the sequel sometime during the next 3 weeks. Funnily enough, I learned once we landed that Zen had seen Spider-Verse on her flight as well, and I just laughed my ass off and said that great minds think alike. There was definitely a feeling of delayed anticipation throughout those 13 hours, and if I was counting down the time before, now I was really getting antsy. But alas, we landed. I was now in the United States of America. Getting off the plane, I was kind of surprised to see how easy it was to get through customs at LAX airport. Now I just need to answer some easy questions, proceed to pick up my bags, and BAM! I'm out. It was so quick that I don't think I was properly prepared when I stepped out and saw everyone for the first time. With that said though, whether I was prepared or not, the moment I had been thinking about for the last 14 months finally happened. I walked up to the pickup area of the airport and standing across from me was Zen, Rosen, and our friends Gomer and Becky. I went to hug Zen in person, which after 5 years of speaking to her across a computer was so satisfying. She was there, in person, and tall. She's a tall bun. Not as tall as Rosen though, cause holy shit, man. No judging from me though, I really gotta respect when a person's got a good height on them. In any case, without much time to really process that, oh my god, this is really happening, we got into Rosen's car and made our way to his and Casey's apartment. On the way, we stopped to get some In-N-Out burger, and I was able to get my first taste of the infamous LA traffic. And I gotta say, it didn't end up being too bad. Who knows, maybe the hoopla around the traffic was just greatly over-exaggerated. We arrived at their apartment, and I think it was this moment where everything finally started to settle in for me. I was finally sitting amongst my friends who I've gotten the chance to know and love online for the past few years. And the thing is, while there was a tad bit of a surreal vibe now that we were all in the same room together, it was honestly little more than a background element for the first day or two. We all sat there together shooting the shit just as we would on Discord, only now we could all look at each other. It was pretty crazy how quick it took for everything to feel normal. Heck, I got so wrapped up in the moment that I even called my aunt to say hi and have her meet my friends. She's been the biggest supporter of me throughout the process of getting to this point, so to share that moment with her meant a lot for me as well. Although Casey was sick on the first day and trying not to get too close to us so he wouldn't be affected. I felt so bad for her, but at the very least she was good enough to come out and join us, which was great to see. Since then and I was starting to get tired from the jet lag, Casey dropped us off at our hotel where I was hoping to finally get some good sleep in after getting a paltry amount on the plane. Sadly, we would end up running into some issues with our reservation, as contrary to what had been shown to Zen when she made the reservation online, she was told that she needed to pay the hotel up front for the entire stay. This both confused and annoyed the both of us, but hey, no matter. Zen had the money on her Wells Fargo card, so she could easily pay for it now. Except it turned out she couldn't because Wells Fargo had given her an ATM card as opposed to a debit card. So now we had to go through the process of trying to fix this whole mess at 11 PM. All the while the website Zen had booked the reservation with was saying she couldn't change the reservation through them and that she'd have to take it up with the hotel itself. At the same time, the hotel was saying that they couldn't change anything on their end and we'd have to call the website. It was a needlessly complicated situation which would have been avoided if the website hadn't listed pay later as an option, which was clearly not in the hotel's policy. Zen, meanwhile, was in the process of transferring the hotel money from the ATM card to her main credit card. But as this was going to take a day to process, we basically had no choice but to cancel the previous reservation, make a single night one for the two of us, and then get a new week-long reservation set up the next day once the money had progressed.
Did you get that?
No!
This was made all the more complicated by the fact that we had a third roommate with us who wouldn't be arriving until the next day, which is why we couldn't set up a week-long reservation for us both that night. Luckily, we were able to sort out the entire situation out the next day when that third roommate graciously offered to pay for the reservation when the money still hadn't been transferred, with Zen paying him back later on. So yeah, that sucked. Luckily, the night was still able to end nicely after I gave Zen the gifts I bought her. I wanted to get her something from both Australia and Macedonia, so I had gotten her a pearl necklace from the latter and a koala plushie from the former, which she keeps referring to as her drop bear, which never fails to make me laugh. That's one big Aussie joke. You'll have to look it up if you don't get it. Day 2 arrived before we knew it, and it ended up faring even better due to all we managed to get up to during that day. For starters, I got to meet Bunny, someone in the group who I was acquainted with but never actually got the chance to properly speak to. And it's because of this that I was shocked to learn that she too was also Australian. So naturally, we became friends pretty damn quickly. The two of us got to try out IHOP for the first time with Gomer and Becky, which Zen ended up missing since, as I came to learn across the trip, she is not a morning person. Something which I kinda knew before, but it's like, no, she really does not like getting up prior to noon, no matter how hard you poke her. She did get up in time for Cantor's though, which was a deli that Rosen wanted to take us to since most people were only just arriving. This included our friends Isaac, Jeff, Eli, and Ethan, the latter of whom you guys will probably know as Monokuma in our storyline. Cantor's is where I knew I'd been for a rough time in the US since the food was way too good. I knew I'd have to try out a ton of places due to just how delicious all of this stuff was, but all the while I was just thinking to myself, man, my wallet is going to despise me. Though ultimately, the experience was just as pleasant as the rest of the trip, since the seeing almost all of us grouped together on the table was the final reminder I needed that this was all real and not just something I imagined up in my sleep. The only low point was that we made our way back to the hotel during rush hour, which resulted in taking, just about 2 hours to reach it. Yep, there's the LA traffic I've heard so much about. Oh, and while we were all grouped up in Isaac and Jeff's room watching AEW, I also got the chance to dip out for a bit and meet our friends Aaron and Michelle, since they stopped to pick up Eli. We didn't get to talk much in the moment, but the hug Michelle and I shared felt so gratifying with all the nights we had spent calling each other over the pandemic. I don't know, I guess you could say Chiaki finally warmed up to me. Also, props to Aaron for driving all the way to LA over the course of 24 hours. He looked so beat, but I'm glad it ended up being worth it. Days 3 and 4 were exciting for a number of reasons. On a surface level, they were the days where we were able to go to Little Tokyo and Disneyland respectively. But beyond that, they were also the days where it felt like we were all in our element and were just able to have a ton of fun together. I started Thursday by giving Casey and Rosen their wedding gifts, wherein I carried the same mindset I had for Zen as I bought them one item from Australia and one from Macedonia. Rosen got the Australian gift, which was an Aussie board game called Squatter, which was fun to give to him purely based on his reaction to the name alone. It was also heartwarming to see Casey's shocked reaction at me having bought her a pearl necklace from Macedonia, which, fun fact, was an idea that my mum had given me. Little Tokyo was a great time, as I got to go gift shopping for the family, explore several different anime and game stores, and have lunch at a curry place. There isn't too much to get into as far as the nitty-gritty details are concerned, but it was just great to see everyone just geek out and go on a shopping spree like the nerds we are. I bought a Japanese copy of Devil May Cry 2 for a friend of mine who's a fan of the series, because I just like to make him suffer. Funnily enough, the Sonic Superstars trailer also dropped in the middle of the day, and considering Zen's playthrough of the classic Sonic games recently, getting to watch that together with her was just a delight. It's also at this time that I have to give massive props to both Casey and Rosen for just how much effort they put into getting everyone around over the course of the week. Zen, Bunny, and I were tagging along with Casey on the Thursday, and after we were done with Little Tokyo, we made our way back to her and Rosen's apartment. And I distinctly remember remember just how burnt out they were at this point alone. Aside from a handful of us who were able to drive, we were all relying on the two of them, and it was obvious how much it wore them out. Even still though, they made damn sure to make that week as fantastic and brilliant for us all in spite of that, and during a time when they were gearing up for their wedding no less. I can't even begin to imagine just how much stress they must have been under to prep for the wedding, get us accommodated, get their families and other friends accommodated, and do a plethora of driving all in between. The two of them are seriously the best, and I cannot send nearly enough love their way. After all that, we then get to Friday, which was the long-awaited day where we finally got to go to Disneyland! I have technically been to Disneyland before, but that was 17 years ago when I was only 7 years old, and it was the one up in Hong Kong, so not only is there a lot I'm fuzzy on, but there's also a lot that was bound to be different. Not only that though, but I finally got to meet Tifa in person! I'm sure most of you watching this video already know who Tifa is, but just in case, she's our second editor on the Bun Squad, and someone who Zen and I hold near and dear to us. She's been one of our greatest friends in the best and worst of times, and when she first arrived at our hotel that morning, I remember giving her the biggest of hugs. As well as this clay painting of Ohrid, which is one of Macedonia's biggest cities. Given Tifa's love for art, I knew I just had to get her something that could stand out like that. But god, Disneyland was something else, man. Just take a look at this photo of us all finally together. There were about 20 of us all in a group together, and while it definitely did lead to some chaos, so much so that we were bound to split up eventually, it also meant that there was so much fun to be had. We started with Space Mountain, which was particularly a ride my aunt wanted me to go on based on her own experience, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. We got to experience Haunted Mansion, I shared some churros with Tifa, and Zen was adamant on torturing me by taking me on It's a Small World. It was not as bad as it was cracked out to be, though that didn't stop me from buying this t-shirt regardless. That said, what ended up being the most memorable experience on a ride without a doubt was Pirates of the Caribbean. And it wasn't just because of the ride itself, let me tell you that right now. You see, partway through the line, we ended up stalling due to the ride breaking down. This in of itself was not a fun time, though at the very least we had each other to keep ourselves company while the crew tried to frantically get people off the ride and sort the issues out. They eventually did, and after what felt like an eternity, we finally got to go on the ride. And that's when things got funny. Pirates of the Caribbean on its own wound up being a fun time, with the design of the attraction and the animatronic work being absolutely insane. And of course, there's the famous drop that happens early on, which did make my heart skip for a moment. Of all the dark rides I got to experience during my visit, it was absolutely my favorite. However, I'd be lying if I said that what happened at the end of the ride did not contribute to that. You see, the ride ends with you passing by Jack Sparrow as he drunkenly sings A Pirate's Life for Me. It's a neat little way to sneak Jack into the ride as you're about to get off. Except we didn't get off, because the ride broke down again. And not only that, but it decided to break down at the best place, or worse depending on your point of view, as we were situated right in front of Jack Sparrow. So here we were, seated in front of Johnny Depp for at least 10 minutes, if not more, as we heard his dialogue repeat about 15 times. Needless to say, our group lost our minds as we were split between two different reactions. Half of us were in absolute agony as we were praying for the ride to start back up so we could get off as soon as possible, while the other half of us were laughing our asses off at the hilarity of the situation. Guess which camp Zen and I fell into? Yes, it was annoying. Yes, it was repetitive. But also, it was so fucking funny.
And a chest of jewels. Bring up.
Attention inside Pirates of the Caribbean. Right to be powered down immediately. Please stand clear.
I humbly accept this magnificent.
Is this usually supposed to happen? I can't even see you.
Larceny, skullduggery, and persnickety. Nick, drink up with me hearties, your own.
I'm so sorry, Casey, but also, God, I was laughing so hard. After eating some lunch in the cantina over at Galaxy's Edge, our group decided to split up since a good chunk of the crew needed to head over to the wedding rehearsal. Zen and I used this opportunity to head over to Disney California Adventure Park, along with Michelle, so we could try out two of the rides over there. Sadly, I didn't get the chance to try out one of those two rides, that being Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, but I did get the chance to try out the Incredicoaster. It was an 80-minute wait, but it was by far the best ride I had experienced all day, and it also spawned one of my favorite photos to come out of the trip. There are no words I can say to explain this face I'm making, and to quote Aaron, God, Zen is such a ham. After the ride was done though, we ended our long day at Disney by heading over to Splitsville for Casey and Rosen's wedding dinner. A dinner that I almost missed because I didn't realize I had been invited to it. This has been another Filip Kanzurovski bimbo moment. It ended up being fine though, and Casey was super reassuring after I was feeling so down about myself at the start of it. At the end of the day, we had a lot of fun. We bowled, we drank, and we celebrated. It was a wonderful time for sure, and by the time we were out of the parks and on our way back to our hotels, there was definitely a bittersweet feeling to be had now that it was all over. Well, at least the Disneyland portion was over. We still had another full day before the wedding left to go. Although saying that, Saturday wasn't exactly the busiest of all days on our end. A lot of the group ended up going to Knott's Berry Farm throughout the morning and early afternoon, but given how early we were up the previous day and how late we ended up going to bed, Zen and I wanted a chance to get some sleep before anything else. Luckily though, we did manage to join the crew in the afternoon for a New Japan Pro Wrestling event that was being held in the area. It wasn't a big show, with it essentially just being a showcase for the trainees of NJPW's US branch, but in a way, that made the show even more fun. For people like Zen and Tifa who aren't big into wrestling, there wasn't any prior knowledge that they needed to know going into the show to have a good time. There was just a bunch of newbies showing us what they could do and why you should keep an eye out for them in the future. And all things considered, I'd say we had a great time.
Zen, how you doing?
Is it great? This is wrestling? Wrestle!
And also, Tifa brushed and braided our hair unexpectedly, and it was the cutest thing ever. God, she's such a sweetheart. After wrestling, we made our way back to Disneyland Resort for a pool party that Casey and Rosen were throwing. After which, Zen, Tifa, Bunny, and I took a stroll through downtown Disney to grab some dinner. I guess unsurprisingly, given that we were with the Latina lady herself, we settled on Tortilla Joe's, which, as expected, was really damn good, really damn filling, and also way too damn much to eat in one sitting. We left that day feeling refreshed from Disney, while also making a ton of memories from all the activities we set for ourselves. I have spent several years of my life now sitting in numerous calls with Zen and Tifa, whether it be to talk about videos or just shooting the shit. So to have an entire day where the three of us could just be together and lose ourselves in the moment ended up being as impactful to me as the real big moments of the trip. And speaking of which, the wedding. Like any true Disney adult, Casey had decided with Rosen that the wedding was going to be held in downtown Disney. Wouldn't be my first idea for a venue, given how pricey Disney can be, but they had help from their parents, so there was nothing to worry about on that end.
Dude, it would also suck way more if you got divorced after a Disney wedding, bro. You wouldn't even be able to watch a Star Wars movie without being reminded of your ex-wife.
Anakin, may the Force be with you.
Divorce?
We rocked up to the resort, and I was able to meet quite a few people who are only showing up for the wedding itself, including Mr. Greg Sunny Jim Sepelek, as well as Mars Girl. Fun fact, Greg had brought Sunny Jim with him, but didn't take it to the venue due to how much of a hassle it would have been. We lamented this after the fact, but we were able to snap some pictures before he left. With everybody all there and ready, we took our seats and watched as the married couple entered. Casey looking absolutely beautiful, and Rosen entering to the Trigun opening like a little fucking weeb. To be fair, Casey's bridesmaids did have Kingdom Hearts music playing in the background, but Disney doesn't count, damn it. All jokes aside though, it was an absolutely wonderful moment to see the two of them tie the knot and get married. They both gave such heartwarming speeches that may or may not have made Zen and I cry, and it was made all the better by the whole gang being there to celebrate the occasion. I know I'm a broken record by this point, so I'll try not to repeat the sappiness again and again, but I mean it when I say this. Rosen, Casey, I love you both. I am so happy that the two of you found each other, and I'm eternally grateful that you've welcomed me into this group. This may be belated, but I hope your life brings you to nothing but the best. So, anyway, Tifa and I danced, and it was awkward as shit. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know how else to bring some levity into this. The reception at the resort was nice for the record. We all got these different fast passes for different Disney rides to indicate what table we'd each be on, with Zen and I being situated on the Mickey Runaway Railway table. The food ended up being really nice, though like anytime I'm at a buffet dinner, I end up taking way too much and ultimately leave at least a third of it unfinished because I have the stomach of a mouse. You know, my mom often tells me that I don't eat enough, and I usually just wave it off as parent worries. But when Zen starts telling me I need to eat more, I start to wonder if there's something legitimately wrong with me. They also had this photo booth in the other room, which we all used to take some sweet and absolutely ridiculous photos with each other. I think John Cena even turned up in one of them. There was a neat variety of music being played, ranging from English covers of anime songs to normal music that the same people at the event wouldn't raise an eyebrow towards. Really, it was just a fun night all around. We got to talk to each other a whole lot, Rosen tossed a wrestling belt as opposed to a garter, and I found myself basking in the moment and just how wonderful everything was. Until it hit me that it would all be ending in the next 2 days. And then I got depressed. I knew most people would be leaving the next day, including Tifa, who wanted to beat the infamous LA traffic in the morning. Meanwhile, Zen and I weren't heading back to Minnesota until Tuesday, so in the final moments before we left our hotel, I started internally dreading this trip being over. So much so that by the time Tifa had dropped us off and we were saying goodbye, my emotions got the better of me and I actually began to cry, not knowing when we'd be able to see each other again. She hugged me, saying that she'd be back to see us off in the morning, which definitely helped. It's just a moment that made me realize how fleeting times like these are, and even if we can't have them all the time, I'm so thankful for being able to take this trip in the first place. Luckily, Tifa was able to stick around for all of breakfast the next morning, since despite initially saying she couldn't, she ended up changing her mind and stuck around for a little while longer. So just remember guys, if your friends or family tell you that they need to do something important and can't stay with you for any longer, guilt trip them. I kid, of course. I was honestly super grateful to even get a chance to have a big breakfast like that with everyone before folks had to dip. Gave us all one last reminder of how awesome that week ended up being. And while it's always a gamble for some of us as to when we can get together again for these kinds of trips, it for sure won't be the last time we see each other like this. We said our goodbyes to Tifa, same with Erin and Michelle, Becky and Goma were gone in the afternoon with the rest departing not long after, and soon we were down to Zen and myself, our roommate, and Bunny. As such, nothing much happened for the rest of the day, so we ended up staying in our hotel room, watching Radio Dead Air Live as Zen and Bunny got high as hell. Yeah, Bunny had bought some edibles a few days prior, and wanted to waste as much as she could, since obviously she couldn't bring them back to Australia. So she shared them with Zen, while I remained the designated sober one, ordering McDonald's. I probably could have tried some out myself, but I decided against it. Drugs do be scary, man. Funny thing is that she didn't even get rid of all of it, so she had to give some to Becky and Goma before they left, and even more to Rosen and Casey the next day. Speaking of, after checking out of our hotel, we hung around Rosen and Casey's apartment once more before it was finally time to take a plane back to Minnesota, ending our time in California. And honestly, that's where I want to leave things off for this video. Don't get me wrong, Minnesota was a fun as heck time in of itself, but while I would love to get into every single minute detail about my time there, this video is already way longer than I intended it to be, and when I get down to it, a lot of my experience in Minnesota could come across as repetitive just looking at it on paper. It wasn't like California, where we were doing something different every day and got up to a bunch of wacky stuff. Nah, in reality, the next 2 weeks of the trip were really just a chance for us to relax and spend some time together now that the wedding was done. It helped Zen and I decompress while in each other's company, which I especially remember being the case for Zen because god, she was burnt out that entire week. That said, I can't help myself with these things, so let me give a brief overview of some of the things that happened. I got to meet Linkara and his wife Vega for the first time face to face, which was a nice, if surreal, experience. I don't like to think about it all too often since it's really not that big of a deal, but sometimes I wonder how 15-year-old me would react if I were to tell him that I was acquainted with Linkara. He'd probably think I was spending too much time on the internet and tell me to get a life. Jokes aside, they were really nice to me whenever we got a chance to see each other, as were all of Zen's friends being real. There was a day we got to meet up with Noah from Dub Talk, who was traveling with his family and just so happened to be driving past Minnesota while I was staying there, so that was cool. Although speaking of friends, I guess you could say, I can't go without mentioning the ones I was the most excited to meet while I was here, Kanna and Chiaki. Yes, Zen can't go 5 minutes without mentioning these two, and when we arrived at her apartment late on Tuesday evening, I finally got to see them. And they were pretty much exactly how Zen has always described them. Kanna opened herself up to me immediately, and was always sitting still to allow me to pet her and hug her, while Chiaki almost always ran in the opposite direction every time I was in her general vicinity. However, that's where things took a turn. See, in just 2 weeks, the cats had gotten quite accustomed with me being around, to the point where, to Zen's utter shock, Chiaki actually let me pet her multiple times. Something which she doesn't let anyone other than Zen do. I'm getting video proof of this just in case. No one believes that I'm actually petting Chiaki. Zen also made sure to show me around the place, taking me to multiple locations around town, including the famous Mall of America. A shopping center so big that it has an entire amusement park within it. We didn't spend much time there, given that we didn't have tickets for the rides, but it was a fun experience nonetheless. Managed to buy some gifts as well, including this Bluey plushie for my cousin, since I'm still shocked at how much of an international phenomenon Bluey has become. Zen also took me to see the largest candy store in Minnesota, which was a great chance to tell my teeth to screw themselves as I plunged myself into all sorts of candy. This included finally getting to try out Calypso, which, contrary to what I've been told, is not in fact minging.
I've just started this Calypso. It is fucking minging. Paradise Punch Lemonade. It is fucking minging. Suck your dad. It's minging, it's fucking minging.
Of course, Zen also took me to several restaurants around the place, including a hibachi restaurant for my birthday. This had to be some of the best food I tried the entire trip. My favorite part was when the chef was doing those cucumber tosses they tend to do, and I was the only one who caught one in my mouth. I don't know what to say. Get good, scrubs. And of course, when we weren't going around from place to place, we were able to do some nice activities back at the apartment. We had Zen watch Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes for the first time, which she ended up really liking, and I helped her record the entirety of her Sonic 3 and Knuckles playthrough. So look forward to hearing my voice when we eventually get around to that. We watched Across the Spider-Verse in theaters, which we both loved, and then we finally got around to seeing Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania at home, which was so bad that we honestly couldn't stop laughing. Really, I could go on, but I already said this wasn't going to be an in-depth look back, yet here I am delving into things again. I guess I just really can't help myself sometimes. In the end, the month flew by, and before I knew it, I was saying goodbye to Zen as she dropped me off at the airport. And hey, with my layoff in LA being a whopping 8 hours long, I got in touch with Casey and Rosen, asking if they want to go out for lunch, and was ecstatic when they said yes. It was a nice cherry on top of this trip before saying goodbye to America as a whole. And then my flight got delayed by 3 hours right as the gates were meant to open, causing my already sleep-deprived ass to break as I had to stay up even longer, all the while I just wanted to fall asleep and... Luckily, when the flight actually got started, I was able to sleep a solid 7 hours, which, fun fact, I have never been able to do on a plane before. It was so bad that I even fell asleep before takeoff, so I had just woken up all like, why are we in the air already? But yeah, folks, that was my time in the US. To all of our American viewers watching, I just have to say that while your land is often derided by foreigners for being a crappy 0 out of 10 country, I'm here to tell you that that is not true. You're at least a 1. On a serious note though, it didn't just extend to my friends being the best in the world either. Pretty much any interaction I had while in both California and Minnesota was an absolute delight. America is one of those places where if you're asked if you'd ever lived there, your impulse response would be to say, lol, no. But after being there myself, my views have honestly altered a little bit. Though maybe that's just the atmosphere of the trip talking. Oh god, the propaganda, it's working. Of course, being a foreigner, I don't have to worry about the awful politics or the paid healthcare or literally any other number of things that could be mentioned. But for the 3 weeks I was there, all of that was honestly just pushed to the back of my mind since I was finally able to cross a massive item off of my life's bucket list. Not just traveling to the country itself, but getting to see online friends in the flesh. As I've mentioned before, it ain't exactly something I plan on making a one-time thing. Sure, life will always find a way to toss a stone into any plans we make, but like that's ever stopped me in the past. Heck, I didn't even know if I'd have enough money to go on this trip, yet I ended up with some money to spare when it was all said and done. I don't know what the future holds, but more than anything else, I want to use this time to further a new goal. A goal for myself to go back and visit everyone as much as I can going forward. It won't always be the same. Heck, it probably will never be the same, but that's a good thing in its own way as well. That no matter how much time changes, I'll always have these memories to treasure and look back on as I move forward in my life. And hopefully, we're all in a better place than any of us are at right now. But I guess only time will tell.
Zen, don't blink, you're on TV.
I don't really have anything to say right now. Look at that.
Pizza Planet, yeah.
I thought Phil was recording like backwards.
Hello.
Hey everyone, we're going to Candy Mountain. Wait, Space Mountain.
There we go, Tessa. I'm actually going to Space Mountain.
Hey, look, 15 minutes.
That's not bad at all.
It's
it
I'm
really
used to an hour
isn't.
wait for Space Mountain.
Yeah.
I sometimes saw it at